I'm going to
Thank you.
do a little bit of housekeeping before we get started with Palak. So, this is officially World Outlier Week. Yes, we made up our own holiday. So, you have to do something that you've never done before and post it and just put Wow Challenge. And our buddy, Brett Hedigan, who is a two-time Olympian, uh, Stanley Cup winner, and the owner of Heady Gear, who makes these sick backpacks, is going to give the top three people backpacks with patches. Whoever does the best Wow Challenge. And right now, I don't know. I saw Tom Doherty in Iceland doing some crazy shit, so he might be in the lead. Who knows? But it is the Wow Challenge. Outlier magazine comes out today. Jacques Pepin is on the cover, and our friend Palak is also on the cover and is featured in the magazine. So if you haven't gotten it, make sure you subscribe. And then we have a ton of fun events coming up. So we're going to be hanging out with Brandi Chastain, two-time Olympic gold medalist, two-time World Cup champ, soccer Hall of Famer. We're going to her team's game, Bay FC, and that is on the 6th of July. So we've got a dozen people going. And if you want tickets, let us know. We got a suite, and we're going to be hanging out with Brandi and having a great, great time at the Bay FC match. Then we're going to the U.S. Open in August. And then we've got our retreat. The retreat is at the Weekapaug Inn. It's the #1 rated hotel in the Northeast, top 100 in the world. And we call it Living with Legends. So one of them, or two of them, are on this call right now. Joe Jacoby, two-time Olympian and Olympic gold medalist in kayak. He's one of our legends. Robert Hamilton Owens, aka the most interesting man in the world. Who else gets an 11-page spread in Outlier magazine other than him? He's in. Megan Riley from Shark Tank. Jackie Summers, who has the #1 most awarded liqueur in the world. And Mace Curran, who is the second female to ever fly lead solo for the Thunderbirds. Those are our legends. So if you want to stay at a place that will blow your mind and walk away with friendships, not photos, well, you walk away with both, I guess. You're going to get photos, but you're going to get friendships. Then contact me, and I'm happy to talk to you more about the retreat. But today is all about my friend Palak Patel. Our format, for those of you who have never been on one of these, is super casual. We're going to talk for about 30 minutes, kind of like fireside chat, and then we're going to open it up for live Q&A. If you have a question for Palak, just put in the chat that you have a question, and then I'll tee you up and you can ask her directly. So we are going to be celebrating her phenomenal book, Food is Love. This book, I cannot decide whether I put it on my coffee table or I keep it in the kitchen. It could go back and forth because literally it is a book that you would proudly put on your coffee table because aesthetically it's just gorgeous. But the content is incredible, all about plant-based recipes. And so we're going to dive into that. She's an award-winning chef. She's a two-time Food Network champ for Chopped and Beat Bobby Flay. She's a TEDx speaker, big TV personality. She's been on the Food Network Today Show. She's been in the New York Times, Forbes, People, Bon Appetit, on and on and on. She is absolutely amazing. So I'm very, very excited for everybody to meet Palak. But before we do that, Kathy, get us started. How's that for an intro, Palak?
Wow. I blown away, blown away. I think that's the best one ever in my career. I will tell you
Well,
that very honestly. Blown
that is
away.
all Mike Perlow. All Mike Perlow. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for joining us from France. That's pretty cool. We've got people literally. Joe Jacoby's in Spain. Pete Shaler is in Nicaragua. So we got a slice of people from all over the world. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. What an honor. I mean, some of those people, wow. Just an honor.
Well, we're excited. So I have so many questions for you. I could easily eat up the whole hour, but I will not. Let's start. Let's say you grew up in India, and I
I
think you
did.
lived there until you were about 12. 15 relatives under one roof. Um, and it was a vegetarian household, which I think is interesting. Um, what was that like? And then talk to us about, I think it was 1990, you moved to Atlanta, Georgia, and I've got to imagine that was a pretty big change for you.
Yeah, huge. I think I'll add one little tidbit to the 15 family situation. I also grew up without a refrigerator, which I know is so hard to imagine. But the way that I grew up eating, you just didn't have any leftovers. You just cooked what you needed the day of. You'd go to the market, cook again. And so when I moved here and we had this massive refrigerator, I was like, what is that? And a freezer really did me in. I was like, wow. Like I knew these things existed, but like a whole freezer was just like a lot for a small brain of mine. But I'm like, what do you put in there?
Very so at 12, what happened that made you guys move to Atlanta?
My mom has one brother and he's been here since he was 18. He did all his schooling here. He's a pharmacist, and I think the plan was always for them to be together in the States. And yeah, so kind of took a little while, and finally I think when I was 12 all the paperwork came through. And I think the biggest thing I can tell you is it's just a culture shock. I think going from, like a school that is a private school to walking everywhere to no refrigerators. I mean, these are just small things to a completely different cultural shift. And to go from there to Atlanta, Georgia was wild. Everything, food, people, language. I remember being in sixth grade and, I grew up speaking British English, and the first day we got to school, I was like, I kind of understand what she's saying. She's speaking English, but she's not speaking British English. So it was a very like, how you doing? And, British English, it's like, how are you doing? So enunciating. So it was a really big culture shock, starting from the first day on.
Um, you know, it's it's timely, I think, that today Outlier magazine comes out with Jacques Pepin on the cover and you featured in the magazine. Tell everybody the story that you told me this morning. So she sent me a video this morning, kind of explaining way back, I think before you knew that this was going to be your career, a cute story about Jacques Pepin.
Yeah, so when we got here, we spent maybe 3 months in the summer in Chicago. And the only channel that we spent a little time with my uncle before moving to Atlanta together is PBS. And so I, kind of knew Tom and Jerry because it was just a cartoon and kids would watch cartoons. There's four of us. So I have a sister and two younger brothers. So four of us would kind of jostle for the remote. And at some point, I tuned into Jacques and Julia, and I was enamored from the very first minute. I mean, they would go to the market, they would cook together, and I full on had a fight with the remote control with my siblings. And they're like, Sesame Street. I'm like, Jacques and Julia, Sesame Street, Jacques and Julia. So yeah, this started very early on, and my first kind of introduction to culinary was just that Jacques Pepin and Julia Child. Frugal Gourmet, if you've ever watched PBS back in those days, where he would just take you to a new place and a new ingredient, new culture. And so I was just enamored as a kid, just watching this entire world kind of come to me through a television.
And you know what's so interesting is now you're a world-renowned chef, but it didn't start like that. So I'd love to talk about the pivot from, I would call it, the pressure of parental expectations to eventually following your passion. Talk about that period of your life because I think it's fascinating.
Yeah, I think this is a very quintessential immigrant story. I think many folks, and it's not just immigrants, but definitely immigrants, they have, as soon as they move to a country, they have these expectations, and rightly so, of their kids kind of landing up safely, going down this like path. You're either a doctor, you're an engineer. And the funniest thing yesterday, I had a call with someone, and she was like, my parents told me, be like Connie Chung, doctor, lawyer, engineer, Connie Chung, she's Asian. So it's really funny because it's such a common theme amongst people that bring their kids here to set them up, go the stable known path. And so I remember finishing undergrad, and I was looking at Le Cordon Bleu. And before I could even finish the sentence, can I go to culinary? Like my parents were like, no. I was like, okay, but I did like good talk. And so there was just an absolute no. It was unknown. We had a cook when we were growing up. It's just the thing to do. And my parents just didn't understand, like, what do you mean culinary arts? Like, we had a cook. Why are you going to send you to school to go cook? So I think that the concept of doing this for a living was very foreign to them. And so I kind of did the, stable path, went to school, went to business school, worked up the corporate ladder, and did all the things that my parents wanted me to do.
And what made you finally pivot? It's
Well, I
interesting
was,
because Candace Nelson, who was on the cover of our inaugural magazine, she was in investment banking. And she's like, you know what? I'm a baker at heart. I want to make cupcakes. And people were
yeah,
like, you're absolutely out of your mind. And I don't think they're saying that anymore. They're certainly not saying that about you.
yeah, I think I was smart. I was like, well, number one, I'm like, I will move as far away as humanly possible. So they were in Atlanta. I relocated to San Francisco. I think one, because of the food scene in San Francisco and all the things that it was like a world that was new to me, wine, food. So I decided to move. And while I was in San Francisco, I decided to moonlight, and I got trained to be a personal chef on my own time. So I was like, great, they can't say no. I did it on the weekends and at evening. And so that kind of set me up to really understand. And I also tell this to a lot of young people. It's great to want to follow your passion, but at least put in the time to see if you really love it. And so I did this on my own time. I did it for a number of years, which is how I met a CEO of a startup I ended up working for. It's just these serendipitous moments, but I kind of just wanted to see if this was for me. And I loved it so much that I just, any free time that I had, that's what I spent doing. So we continued that till about 2011 when the startup that I was working for sold. And I relocated to New York and went back to culinary school at night. I still was working because I was still afraid of my parents. I was a grown adult, still afraid to tell them. I don't know, many of you can relate, but I'm like, yeah, no, I'm not going toe to toe with my parents. And so I finished school, worked for a couple more years, and then finally think there were enough things happening kind of on my own time. All of the Food Network stuff was on my days off. Like, it's so funny to tell people that, I would take a PTO day, go film, and I won these shows, and I'd come right back to work, and I'd sit in a meeting, and clients would look at me and look at me. I know you from somewhere. I know you from somewhere. And I couldn't like derail the meeting. And I'm like, yeah. And then at the end of the meeting, I'd politely pull them, aside. And I'm like, I think you might have seen me on Food Network. They were like, I knew it. And so, you know, because I see them like racking their brain, like, where have I seen this face? Because it didn't make any sense. So it was really just really interesting. In fact, the last company I worked for, the CEO also didn't know. And he said he came down the stairs when I accepted the job a couple of weeks into it. And he was like, imagine my surprise when I see you on my big screen and comes into the office. He's like, what? I was like, well, yeah. So it took a little while, but that's my own path. And finally I, you know, had the guts and enough accolades to kind of make that jump. And then I did, and the parents were fine after.
I think it's such great advice because I think, we live in a world now where entrepreneurship is, a pretty sexy thing to do, or at least on the surface, it looks like that. And I think a lot of people think in kind of a binary way. They're like, you either have to jump off the cliff or not. And, there are lots of different ways to get there. And I like that you kind of dipped your toe in and started moving in that direction, and now look where you are. Let's talk about food is love. um I love that it's more, to me it's way more than a cookbook. And I guess talk to us first about it. A lot of it is about joy and connection. So talk to us about joy and connection and how that traces back to food.
Yeah. So when I started writing this book, one of the questions, if you've ever gone through kind of the publishing journey, your why is always kind of at the center, right? Like, why do you want to write this book? Why you? Why now? And those are some of the fundamental questions that you need to kind of be prepared to answer. So pandemic had gone, my life had kind of taken a different turn after 2020. And I sat there and thought about like what really got me out of the pandemic funk. And it was food. And so I really started exploring back to memories that I had, or what really makes me happy, or how do I actually go into the kitchen. And lo and behold, all of these memories kind of solidified into my relationship to food. And the Food is a Love title really, I mean, there's a funny story that I'll share at the end. But the title is really the explanation of what my relationship to food is and how my family showed love. Um, and so it just started in that manner. And then when I started the why, it's like, well, I don't really go in there and I don't say I want a grilled cheese sandwich. I go into the kitchen and I say, I want something comforting, or it's raining, or, oh, I'm missing my mom. I want to make something, or, you know, a friend's coming over and I really want to celebrate something. And so the book is really laid out into these different emotions. And instead of separating it by soup and salad, it's food emotion. So food is joyful, food is nostalgic, food is caring, food is celebratory, food is indulgent. And so these are the ways that I feel that we can connect to food in a different way. And to that, the title is really funny because in my language, there's really no word for I love you. And so if you ever ask any Indians, you know, if their parents ever told them they love them, probably not, but they probably gave you a bag full of food. They probably filled your, you know, car with gas or did your laundry when you were in college. Like these like acts of service were big in my culture and growing up in my household. And so I felt the title of the book was very fitting to my explanation of like, it's a beautiful relationship to have with food.
Um, Tell us a little bit about why the focus is on plant-based.
Great question. Well, I grew up vegetarian and I served on a plant-based advisory council. And I think as 2020 went on, my mom has diabetes and she's very, very in control of it. And as I started researching, plant-based really kind of kept coming up. And so what I wanted to do was give people an option. You know, we don't live in a world of absolutes. And I thought there were plenty of other books. If you want to eat meat, wonderful. But I didn't think that there were enough plant-based, Indian-inspired books out there. And so I made a decision to make it completely plant-based. Obviously, there are recipes in there. You can put chicken on it if you feel like it. You can turn any number of these dishes into whatever you'd like. They're yours once you have the book. But making it plant-based is really just a kind of an option for anyone who's looking to explore, because there's a lot more people that are looking to adopt plant-based eating than there ever were. And so this is a great format to be able to give people easy recipes that are fun and indulgent at times, and that are completely plant-based. You won't miss the meat.
This is just a curiosity question. This just popped into my head. So 11 Madison Park in New York City was rated the #1 restaurant in the world. And they changed it over to a fully plant-based. So this is the #1 restaurant in the world.
Yes.
That, the lengths that they went to get there are pretty incredible. Did that shock you? Was that surprising to you?
Yes and no. Yes, because he's an absolute renegade, right? Daniel Hum is at the top of his game. He always has. So from a standpoint of that decision to go plant-based, if there was anybody that was going to do it and really do it, Daniel is it, right? Now, number two, I think people didn't really give him a lot of leeway. Everyone was like, "Oh, 6 months, the restaurant's going to fail," and it's really interesting to me that we have such solidified views of plant-based or not. Why can't it just be a good restaurant, right? That has amazing food, and anyone that's eaten there, it's still ticking. It didn't close down in 6 months, and Daniel's not going anywhere. He's also had some time in India, like that's not really in the press, and he spent a lot of time in India and yoga and consciousness. So I suspect some of those decisions are from that, but also just he is watching the world as we all are, and he decided to put his art to do something about a change that he believes in, and I applaud him for that.
I think it's the first picture in the book. So the first picture in the book and your answer to what you would save if in a fire are the same thing. So if you have not read the feature, Palak's feature in Outlier magazine yet, if you have, spoiler, but tell us a little bit about that first picture and your answer to what you would save in a fire.
Yeah. So I'm big into sentimental gifts. Not a big stuff is nice, but a couple of birthdays ago, I was gifted and this is something that everyone on the call can do. It's available, I believe, on Etsy. And my best friend and sister got together. My favorite recipe from my mother, they had her handwrite it. They sent it into this Etsy vendor, and it was then inscribed onto a cutting board. This is probably one of the most meaningful things that I have gotten for my birthday. And it is the one thing that I would save in the fire, along with my passport. I think these memorable bits that are my history that, are meaningful to me, that particular cutting board with her handwriting is just gives me all the feels.
I love it. I love it. I grew up, my dad was a mechanic, and we were literally like the cobbler with no shoes. Like we had cars that barely ran and stuff like that. So I'm curious, what does a celebrity chef, what's a typical breakfast, lunch, and dinner for you? Or would we be surprised by anything?
Not quite. I'm very simple. If I'm entertaining, that's different. I love to host. And so if right now it's peak summer, I overindulge in produce. In fact, I went to the market here in France and brought 2 big bags of I just can't stop myself. So I've eaten from the market, I suppose. So any given day, it's probably whatever I picked up from the market. Nothing elaborate. I'm pretty simple in that manner, unless there's a crowd. And then it's like, okay, time to roll
Yeah.
the sleeves up. And I'm like, Indians and I think Italians, maybe other, but Italians and Indians are very like similar in the we cook too much. Um, you would think that 20 people came over when there's only four. And I'm like, we're not going to have enough food. We're not going to have enough food. I still have that.
Would anything surprise us? Like, you've got a stash of Pop Tarts or Doritos somewhere, or
My guilty pleasure is for car rides. I always love chips. So those jalapeno kettle chips. I mean,
mm,
it's always in my bag when I'm traveling. It's the thing I buy at the airport and a bottle of water. So yes, kettle chips or salt and vinegar chips. Like I'm a big salty person, so if I'm gonna go French fries or potato chips.
um, I love like these obscure questions because this is literally what goes through my head. You have this very cool logo, and to me, I don't know if the middle is a fish, or tell us a little bit about. And you guys can't see it, so you're gonna have to go buy the book, and you're gonna have to, scope out her logo. But tell us about the logo. I'm always fascinated by how people came up with the thing that they think represents them or their company.
Yeah, so it's so first initial P, last initial P put together. Fun fact, this logo was something I did not ask for. So I would say maybe about 15 years ago, my cousin's friend, who was a designer for Victoria's Secret Pink, I believe the athletic and pajama brand. So VS Pink, he designed that logo, and I think he was just playing around one day and said, "Oh, I made a logo for your cousin," and sent me the two P's linking together, um, almost like Vescus Pisces. Like, what's the two circles going together? But yeah, it's something that I had no hand in. I was gifted that logo, and I've loved it and used it since. Yeah, and it's the only mock-up that I got. There were a couple of other ones, but they were all similar, and I loved it.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. So last question from me, because we've got a lot of people that want to ask you questions. Um, Obviously, we are a community. We believe in the importance of community. You believe in the importance of community. Um, why in your mind is it so important?
I think if there was any doubt about the role or importance of community, I think we just need to look back at 2020 when we were deprived of our communities. And I think we would very quickly realize how important as humans it is for us to have our people, um, to thrive with, to go through challenges with, to celebrate with. And to me, you're kind of a denominator of your community and the people that you spend time with. And what a beautiful gift, right, to have. And I think I was always fortunate to have a community, but after going through 2020, I think I'm doubly fortunate to have the ability to spend time and hug people and go to places and travel and yeah, be in close proximity. So community is such a gift, and I'm grateful for all the roles that it plays in my life.
Well, you're officially adopted into the Outlier Project
Thank you.
community, so
I
you're
love
not going to
it.
be able to get rid of us. Are you ready for some questions?
I am. I so also looked at the U.S. Open, so don't be surprised if I track you down.
Nice. Oh,
Yeah,
I would love to see you there. Love it. We're gonna
yeah,
have such a good time.
love
All
it.
right, we're going to Boston. Lindsay Dowd.
Pollock, thank you so much. I'm like the biggest food snob that doesn't cook. So I I love Top Chef. I love all the things. I follow all the chefs. It is like a total joy to hear your story. So thank you. I have two questions for you. One is what would you, this is our WOW challenge week, as you heard Scott say, what would you challenge us to try that maybe most of us haven't? And then the second question is, well, I'll answer that and I'll ask you the second question because I don't want to confuse them. They're different.
Yeah, if you have been hesitating on adopting a plant-based, why not try it for a day? If you've done it for a day, I challenge you to try it for a week, and just see how it goes.
Great tip. Something I would love to do more of. And then this is more to a question about culture. I talk a lot about leadership and culture, and I'm just wondering, have you seen a shift in the kitchen, in kitchens you worked in, on how they're handling leadership now? I mean, I know in the kitchen it's a pretty hierarchical system and people have their roles and they stay in their roles, but when it comes to creativity and inspiring creativity in others, have you seen any shift in the way that that's been handled over the years?
Yes, I think just by having different voices and different demographics show up and different cultures contributing to what's on our plate. And it's not just the plate, right? It's the stories that we share, it's the books that we read, it's the articles. And so I'm fortunate enough to be able to share that. And I think there are tons of women, not just me, but there are tons of women in the industry that are kind of paving the way of doing that for the collective. And I'm grateful. I think, am I going to see a completely different kitchen in my lifetime? I hope so, but it's incremental. It's not a overnight, but from 10 years ago to now, there's definitely a big shift.
I love hearing that. Thank you.
Bruce in Portland, all bundled up in his sweatshirt.
Yes, it's a little nippy here in the morning. Palak, thank you so much for spending quality time with us. I don't know if you're familiar with a show on Hulu called The Bear, which in my estimation is the best show on television, hands down, about a chef in Chicago who takes over his late brother's Italian sandwich shop. The intensity of that show, the interaction, the interplay, all the chefs, they call each other chef. I don't know how many people in the Outlier Project are familiar with this show, but I'm dying for you to weigh in on this. Have you seen it? What do you think about it?
I have not seen it, but I've seen and heard enough about the Bear. Look, there are traditional kitchens that absolutely that is true. It's not that far-fetched. There have been stories that I've heard about people, coughing up blood and still being on the line. So it's not ideal, but it is reality now. It's also a choice, right? I think as the younger chefs are coming up, it's definitely a choice. You can still command respect without abusing your staff. So it's a fine balance, but with a hint of entertainment. It's an interesting conversation I also had with Tom Colicchio, if you're familiar. He's the judge on Top Chef, and everyone asks him the same question. But he's very stern, but yet soft, right, and soft-spoken. He doesn't need to scream, And I think the Gordon Ramsays of the world, or whoever the Bear is modeled after, kind of took the industry black mark to a degree that I think people are like, wow. But yeah, much of it is true. Not for every single restaurant to be.
So I need to add that your WOW challenge is going to be to watch an episode and you're going to be hooked. You're going to love it.
I will accept that challenge.
I'm assigning that to you on behalf of the Outlier Project.
There you go.
And I happily accept.
I had a just question that just popped into my head. You've been a judge and you've also been a contestant. Do you have a preference?
Definitely a judge. I mean, don't want to run around. It's intense. Cooking under time with 30 cameras it is, I'm an adrenaline junkie, side note. So much of like my kicks come from doing marathons and jumping out of planes and climbing Kilimanjaro. So yes, I do love the adrenaline rush, but at the end of the day, it's kind of nice to sit back and watch somebody else run around like a chicken with their head cut off.
All right, Paul in Florida, you're up.
Oh, Palak, first, I just want to say thank you so much for your time. This has been such an insightful conversation. I think you've proved what I felt for a long time, that food is a love language. I'm really curious for you because my challenge that I'm doing for World Outlier Week is writing my book, and kind of a two-part question for you. What was the biggest lesson that you've learned on your book writing journey that you would share with new authors? And then the second part is, what is the biggest gift that your book has given you?
Oh, beautiful questions. I think the first one, what did I learn? And they're kind of, I'll blend the answers together because they kind of go together. Writing a book is just as much about learning about yourself as it is teaching others or whatever it is that the subject that you're writing about. And it's a very introspective journey. And I was not fully prepared to understand like how deep you have to dig. And it's a beautiful, authentic, very vulnerable exercise to be able to, share whatever it is that you need to share, or recipes, and there are moments of second guessing and questioning, like, is this going to make sense? Is it not? So it's a beautiful exercise in learning about yourself. And then for anyone writing a book, like I think the best advice that was given to me is the why, right? Why this book and why you? When you can really dig, and that's where the introspection comes into play, then you can write a book that no one else has written, right? In your own voice. Because my writing teacher used to say, everyone has one book in them. If you lived, you have a book. And so to pull that out authentically and through a lens that only you've been able to see, what a gift, right? So as you're going through the process, keep going back to, what do you see the world as, and how would you want your reader to see the world? And that's what comes out on a page.
Powerful. Thank you. I'm a huge adrenaline junkie too, so I love skydiving and all that stuff. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, we're going back to Oregon. So our newest member to the Outlier Project literally just joined yesterday. Josh McLean, who I had an incredible conversation with, works at Nike. He said his goal in life was to work at Nike and to become a part of the Outlier Project. Well, that second one might be a lie. The first one was not a lie, but super, super interesting guy. Josh, you're up. You're on mute. This is his first day, guys. Give him a break. Still on mute. If I had Joe Foster from Reebok on here right now, he'd nail this.
Oh,
saying.
wow. Wow. Those are
88
fighting
years old.
words.
I know.
Those are fighting
All right, we'll
words.
come back to you. Mark Holden in Chicago.
Yes, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it. One of the quotes you've already said that stood out dramatically to me: you are the denominator of the community you spend time with. That's so elevated. And I used to say things like, you are the product of the 5 people you spend time with, but that's beautifully said. So thank you for that gift today. Food is everything. Food is a conduit of expression. It's cultural sharing. It is meditative. And that specifically is what I wanted to ask you about. In a little expose in the Outlier magazine today, you talked about how you enjoy meditative states and, being sort of introspective. How has food been a medium for you, not only in your younger days, but now as you've written your book and it becomes a new version of expression and introspection? I'd love to know that. And just real fast, I love being in the kitchen myself. I love cooking for people. I love hosting. I love, kind of unwinding after a long day and just using my hands, mindlessly going about the business of mise en place kind of thing. So how has expressions of food changed for you over time?
Yeah, I think what went from early childhood of watching my mom kind of get dinner in a rapid fashion, and like just hurrying, throwing things, even that chaos had a rhythm to it, because it was all done so methodically, even as haphazard as it was to a child's eye. And as I got older, I just finished my first Vipassana, which is a 10-day silent meditation. For those of you that are into meditation, it's like 10 days of absolute silence, and you come out like, but in the book, I talk about it doesn't need to be a 10-hour meditative experience, right? So each chapter with the emotion also has a page of kind of an open-ended question. So if it's the food is vibrant chapter, it's like take a moment to go to the grocery store and spend 15 seconds just kind of eyeing through the colors and textures, right? Because those are connective moments to connecting to your food, connecting to yourself. If you can close your eyes, if you're hearing something, right, in the kitchen, and we do cook with our senses. It's impossible not to. I will challenge anyone that says, I don't cook, or I don't cook, and don't enjoy it. Your senses are involved, whether you like it or not. Now, some of us enjoy it more than others. That is a fact. But you are, by just being in the kitchen, evoking your senses. So whether it's smell, touch, taste, all of these things come at play. And so you don't need to sit on a floor mat to have that meditative experience. It could just be thinking about something or really savoring a bite of food and really being present, right? So all of meditation is just the act of presence. And so cooking, you have to be present. You're either going to burn something or you're going to cut yourself. So to me, cooking allows you to be as present as humanly possible, but at the same time, take off and just kind of journey somewhere for a hot minute and come right back. So I feel like it's a beautiful dance between being present and floating away while you have your eyes closed, tasting something amazing.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Beautiful
questions.
Kyle in Iowa. Look at that. Is that a real background?
Yeah, I'm at a Starbucks today.
Nice. Good weather in
Yeah,
Iowa.
thanks, Palak, for being here. Yeah, good weather. Actually, I'm actually in Wisconsin today. The Starbucks in Wisconsin. So I'm not even in Iowa.
Gotcha.
But Palak, thanks for being here today. Great story. Great to learn more about you. I asked this question a couple weeks ago to Kevin Rimple, and I think I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you the same one. So if you could share a meal with anybody living or deceased, who would it be and why?
Great question. I believe this was also in my outlier write-up. I've never met my grandfathers on either side. And so I would love to cook for them. Very simple, like, we're big into simplicity growing up. So a lentil dish, which is very like humble staple dish of India. But the whole idea of it is I would love to kind of hear their stories, and I want to meet them when they were kind of having kids. So in that moment of time when they became fathers, because I never had any chance. I only heard a few stories here and there. My mom's dad, he passed away when she was 2. So I really have no connection to either grandfathers. And so what a great opportunity if I were ever to be given that, to invite them both to dinner.
Love that. Love it.
Thank you.
We're going back to Lindsay. Lindsay has another question.
I don't mean to be a question hog, but I need to know, what did you beat Bobby Flay with?
Chicken curry.
Yes. I love that you beat him. That's like such a triumph. That should be like right on your LinkedIn headline.
Oh, you know what? I've never considered putting that, but you know what? I may. I just may. I was the first.
I beat Bobby Flay.
First female. I was the
Yeah.
first female also in that
And
show
if y'all
to
haven't
ever
seen
be
that
in-
show, it's really hard to beat him. So that's a major, major thing.
Why do you think you beat him?
I think the cameras actually didn't bother me, and my goal so you have to go through someone before you get to challenge him. And when I got through the first round and I got to challenge him with my dish, my only goal to myself was don't look up, don't worry about what he's doing, don't serve anything raw, and yeah, and don't cut yourself on national TV. That was it. And so I actually never looked to that side. I might have caught glimpses of him, but I never like turned my head to see what he was doing. It was just me and me. And then when the time was up, I was like, well, see what best I did. And I think Indian's also not his strong suit. So I kind of had a little leg up.
Who do you admire in the culinary world? Are there some people that you really look up to?
I started this journey. I remember when I moved to San Francisco, my office was in Berkeley, California. And so anybody that kind of follows the food world, Alice Waters has a restaurant in Berkeley called Chez Panisse. And now this is before, the Michelin thing was kind of uh, spreading like wildfire in the US, because at the time it was Alice Waters restaurant, and then the only Michelin star restaurant was in Napa, Thomas Keller's French Laundry. Didn't care for French Laundry, but I remember my very first meal at Chez Panisse, and I was blown away. I've also cried at many meals because I again, some things that I've eaten have just really taken me out of body experience, and Chez Panisse was one of them. And just everything she's done for the movement, who she is as a person. So I've always admired her. And early in my career, I got to meet her and eat at the restaurant. So it's always stuck with me.
Love it. Love it. You've accomplished so much so early. What are you excited about?
Oh, good question. I recently, well, a couple of years ago, I read this book called Second Mountain. I don't know if many of you are familiar with it. It's a book by David Brooks, and it talks about kind of getting to the mountain, the first one, which is very accolade driven, success and all of these things. And then you get to the top of that mountain. By no means was I trying to get to the top, but for me, that symbolism of getting to a top of the mountain where, all the accolades are done. And then he talks about the second mountain, which is more service driven, which is more impact based. And I think I'm very much in my second mountain climb at this stage of my life. Not to say that all of these other things are great. I just think that when you get to the top, you kind of look around and you're like, there's got to be more. And so the more is finding impact and finding a bigger way to serve people and be of service with the gift.
And that's so beautiful. When I was talking to Jacques the other day, his foundation, which is, relatively new, is just such a passion of his. And he'll be 90 next year, and man, you see he is not slowing down at all. I mean, he is cooking, painting, entertaining, writing more books. It's incredible. And I would say the common denominator, whether it's Robert Hamilton Owens, who's on this call, or whether it's, Joe Foster, who founded Reebok, or whether it's Hap Claw, who founded North Face in 1968, or Jacques Pepin, is there's no retirement. They have kept iterating and kept moving, and I've never seen people with more energy and passion for life and living because they're not looking for anything to end. They're excited at 80 something, whatever, to, climb that next mountain or achieve that new thing, which I think is just so cool to see.
Yeah, I love, when I look at careers and people like that, I mean, he's definitely legend status in my book. But it goes back to this idea that we are kind of these like diamonds, right? And there's facets of us. And as we get into different phases of our life, we get to explore and kind of look at a different facet. And I love that because that means that there is no such thing as retirement. And you can start over doing just about anything because you can and you should. So whatever that looks like, whether there's a consistent thing or you're doing new things and retiring the things that don't bring you joy, whatever that looks like for you, it's this idea of shining a light on the different facets of us and experiencing them fully.
Are you a creative outside of the kitchen? Like Jacques is a very, very talented artist. I mean, his artwork is unbelievable, and it doesn't get talked about too, as much, obviously. But do you have that side of you outside of the kitchen?
Sure, you should see my stick figure paintings. Like, no, just kidding. Yikes. No drawing for me, but I do, like, I find a lot of creativity in biohacking my life. So whether it's meditation or breath work, yoga, running, any number of these things bring me a lot of creativity because it allows my brain to stop. And yeah, just spending time with family. So biohacking takes up quite a bit of time because I'm always intrigued and reading about one thing or the other.
And so you are a yoga practitioner, you meditate. What are some of the other things you do that are really important?
Breath work, mindfulness, and not all together, right? It's not like I have a 4-hour morning, but I think at different moments, different things come into play. So breath work has been powerful in terms of getting to elevated states. It oxygenates our blood and really, like, if you want to feel like hyper alert and hyper, like, try breath work. It's using your own breath to get to elevated consciousness. It's powerful. And just, yeah, just even being still or running. I'm taking running back up. Like after Boston Marathon, I kind of injured both knees, one in New York and one in Boston. The right one first and then the left one. So probably no more marathons, but I will pick up just short distance running again because I do find a rhythm in kind of getting lost in just, yeah, and a great way to see places when you're just traveling.
So our last question comes from one of my favorite people on the planet, Victoria. So Victoria is a huge foodie, and her posts on LinkedIn about the stuff she creates is absolutely incredible. She is also the person who puts Outlier magazine together, and when you look at it, and it is, I mean, the content is killer, but aesthetically it's just a gorgeous magazine. And I don't say that because, it has anything to do with me. It's all Victoria. She is so unbelievably talented. So Victoria, you are up.
Thank you, Scott. Hi, Palak. It's nice to meet you. I actually
Hi.
have two questions. First is more personal for me. What's your process as a chef? Because I know chefs are one of the most creative people in the world. What's your process in like making a new dish? Like, what do you think of first? Is it the protein or is it, for example, the sauces? Because I know you love making sauces. And then the second is, I was wondering if you were given the challenge to create a special dish that depicts an outlier, what would that be?
Ooh, good
That's a good
question. Wow. Okay, so the first one, not really methodical. I get a lot of inspiration just by looking at produce. I know it sounds funny, but I grew up vegetarian, as I mentioned. So going in and seeing something of color, seeing something of texture, it always drives me to a dish or a flavor profile. And so that's generally kind of looming in my background. The other thing, which I didn't realize until much later in life, so I have a mom that never wasted any food. And if you know how to do that, turns out that's also a gift at work because, you know, food costs and sustainability. Before it became a cool thing, my mom was doing it like a rock star. She never wasted anything. And so that inherently became a driving factor in, oh, I have this and this and this. It just becomes kind of a little bit of a superpower where I've gone into people's kitchens and they're like, how did you make a meal? Like it was like a can of this and a little like, you know, like spoiled, halfway spoiled thing and a wilted piece of this. And I'm just like, oh yeah, do it. I'm channeling my mom, also the sustainability, you know, thing that is driving our industry now. So I think those are kind of the big factors that help me make a dish. For the outliers, okay. So one of my favorite ingredients, which I feel is a super ingredient, and I feel like you are all a community-based crew, and you're tight, and you do things together, you challenge each other. I will make a mushroom dish, and the reason why is mycelium, which is the super connector of the forest and the trees. It's the membrane that connects all the forests. Well, mycelium is responsible for the beautiful fungi that we eat. And so it's one of the most remarkable things that has been studied in recent history and culinarily as well. So mushrooms I find fascinating because they're in the league of their own. They're not a vegetable. They're not a fruit. They've got their own genre, just like you guys, and they're very tightly bound by mycelium.
I love that. We have to create a cookbook and we need a bunch of mushroom recipes in there. So we may
I
be
got
coming
you.
back to
I
that.
got you. I got you.
We have one more question. Can you do you have time for one more question? Palak?
Yeah, of course.
Oh,
Yes.
you do. Cool. Awesome.
Yes.
Sandy in Seattle.
All right. Thank you, Scott. Thank you so much for sharing. This is kind of a softball question, I guess, as we leave, but what's one tip that you've observed with kind of us common folk in the kitchen that you could share with us that you feel like would make us all better chefs?
I'll answer that two ways. Number one, trust your instincts. I always, every time I'm in the kitchen, people are like, "Oh, well, you're cooking for you. Trust your palate, right? Because if you don't like it, who cares? Who cares what anybody else thinks, right? So trust your palate and your instincts when you're cooking. And number two, please don't cook with dull knives. That's my PSA.
No dull knives. Perfect.
No dull knives.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, my wife and I sometimes we make these very simple dishes that we're like, this is so good. Like, why can't you get this at any restaurant? It's so because I think sometimes we overcomplicate things that don't need to be overcomplicated, and you know, we try to throw truffles and everything to make it sound
Nope.
good when in reality sometimes simple is the best. So that's us
Simple is
trusting
the
our
best.
instincts.
Yeah, trust your instincts and cook for what you love and cook what you like. Doesn't matter. You're not producing it for 500 people, just you.
Exactly. Exactly. Guys, this went by in the blink of an eye. Definitely read her feature in Outlier magazine. Buy this beautiful book, and you can transfer it from coffee table to kitchen. It is unbelievable, and definitely leave a review. Reviews mean a ton to authors. So, Palak, I cannot thank you enough. How long you in France?
Just till Wednesday. I leave Wednesday morning.
And then back to Atlanta.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, safe travels. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for joining us. You're amazing, and I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. By the way, I have to tell you, this is probably one of the most memorable things I've done in terms of the book tour. This was really special. So thank you. And the questions, wow, like very, very special.
We have a cool group. That means a lot to hear that from you. So I really, really appreciate it. This is a special group of human beings. It really is. And I pinch myself every day. I cannot believe that I get to be surrounded by these unbelievable people every single day. It's a blessing.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I hope to see more of you. And yeah, we'll nickname you the Mycelium Crew.
There we go. I love it. I love it. Thanks, Palak. We'll see ya.
Thank you. Thanks.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.